The cabin of Flight 447 hummed with the familiar sounds of travel that Saturday afternoon. Passengers settled into their seats with newspapers and novels while flight attendants moved through the aisles with practiced smiles. In seat 3A sat Robert Chen, a man whose tailored navy suit and leather briefcase spoke of boardrooms and bottom lines. At 42, he had built an empire in commercial real estate, but today his usual composure had completely abandoned him. In his arms, his 6-month-old son Michael wailed with the kind of desperate crying that makes every parent's heart ache. The tears had started before boarding and showed no signs of stopping. Robert had tried everything he knew. He'd offered the bottle, he'd checked the diaper, he'd walked the aisles during boarding until the flight attendants gently asked him to take his seat. Nothing worked. Robert's wife Sarah had died just 4 months ago. A sudden aneurysm that the doctors said no one could have predicted. One moment she was laughing at breakfast, the next she was gone. He still couldn't quite believe it. Couldn't accept that he was now raising Michael alone. This trip to Boston was for Sarah's mother, who had suffered a stroke. Robert had no choice but to bring Michael along, though he'd been dreading it for days. The businessman in him was used to solving problems with efficiency and logic. But babies, he was learning, didn't care about quarterly reports or strategic planning. Michael just cried and cried, his small face red and scrunched with misery. Around them, passengers shifted uncomfortably. An older man in 4C put in earbuds. The woman across the aisle opened her magazine with more force than necessary. Robert felt their judgment like heat on his skin. He was the inconvenience, the disruption, the man who couldn't even calm his own child. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Michael, feeling tears prick his own eyes. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I don't know what you need. I wish your mama was here. She would know what to do." 3 rows back, in seat 6B, sat Natasha Williams. At 23, she was heading home to Boston after a difficult week in Chicago. She'd been interviewing for nursing positions at various hospitals, but nothing had worked out. The rejection emails had piled up in her inbox. Her student loans felt like a mountain she'd never climb. The small apartment she shared with 2 roommates was cramped and cold. Sometimes she wondered if she'd made a mistake choosing this path. But when she heard the baby crying, something stirred in her chest. Not annoyance like the other passengers. Recognition. She'd spent the last 2 years doing her clinical rotations in pediatrics. She'd held countless crying babies and learned to read the subtle signs of their distress. This cry was different from hunger or a wet diaper. This was the cry of a baby who felt the tension in the person holding him. Who sensed the grief and fear radiating from his father. Natasha unbuckled her seatbelt. The plane hadn't taken off yet. The flight attendant was still making announcements about emergency exits and flotation devices. She moved up the aisle slowly, not wanting to startle anyone. When she reached row 3, she saw the father hunched over the baby. His shoulders were shaking slightly. He was crying too, she realized. Trying to hide it but unable to stop. "Excuse me," Natasha said softly. Her voice was gentle, the same tone she'd practiced in the neonatal unit. "I'm a pediatric nurse. Would you like some help?" Robert looked up at her. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. For a moment, his pride almost made him refuse. He was Robert Chen. He handled billion-dollar deals. He employed 300 people. He shouldn't need help from a stranger on an airplane. But then Michael let out another wail and Robert's resolve crumbled completely. "Please," he said, "I don't know what's wrong. I've tried everything." Natasha slid into the empty seat beside them. The middle seat that no one ever wants. She held out her hands, and after a moment's hesitation, Robert passed Michael to her. The baby's crying didn't stop immediately. Natasha hadn't expected it to. But she held him differently than Robert had been holding him. She turned him slightly, supporting his head in the crook of her arm. She began to sway in a slow, rhythmic motion. Back and forth, like the ticking of a clock or the rocking of a boat on calm water. "There now," she murmured. "There now, sweet boy. You're okay. Everything's going to be okay." She placed her palm flat on Michael's chest, giving him gentle pressure. In nursing school, they'd learned that this sometimes helped babies feel more secure. More grounded. She kept up the swaying motion, never stopping, never rushing. Just a steady, patient rhythm. Robert watched in amazement. The crying began to taper off. Michael's sobs became hiccups. The hiccups became quiet whimpers. And then, miraculously, the baby fell silent. His tiny fist clutched at Natasha's sweater. His eyes, so like his father's, began to drift closed. "How did you do that?" Robert asked. His voice was thick with emotion. "Sometimes babies pick up on what we're feeling," Natasha said quietly. "He could sense your worry, your sadness. It made him feel unsafe. Once someone calm held him, he could finally relax." Robert nodded slowly. He looked down at his hands. "His mother died 4 months ago," he said. He hadn't planned to tell this stranger his story, but the words came out anyway. "I don't know what I'm doing. I work 70 hours a week. I have nannies and assistants, but none of that matters when he's crying and I can't help him. I feel so lost." Natasha felt her own eyes grow damp. "I'm so sorry," she said. "That's a terrible loss, for both of you." They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the plane's engines roared to life. The flight attendants took their seats. But in row 3, time seemed to have slowed to something gentler. "He just needs to feel you're going to be okay," Natasha said. "Babies are incredibly perceptive. They feel everything we feel. When you hold him, try to take a few deep breaths first. Try to find some calm inside yourself, even if you have to pretend at first. He'll feel that change, and it will help him settle." "That's hard to do," Robert admitted. "Finding calm. Everything feels like chaos right now." "I know," Natasha said. "Grief is like that. It turns your whole world upside down. But you're still here. You're still showing up for him. That matters more than you know." The plane began to taxi toward the runway. Natasha should return to her seat. But she looked at the sleeping baby in her arms and couldn't quite bring herself to move. "Would you like me to hold him for takeoff?" she asked. That's often when babies get fussy because of the pressure in their ears. If he's already asleep, he might stay that way. Robert felt a lump in his throat. This young woman who had nothing to gain from helping them, who had probably paid for the cheapest seat on the plane while he sat in first class, who was offering him kindness when the rest of the passengers had only offered judgment. "That would be wonderful," he managed to say. "Thank you." As the plane lifted into the sky, Natasha kept Michael cradled in her arms. She continued the gentle swaying motion even while seated. Robert watched them, this stranger caring for his son with such natural grace. He thought about Sarah and how she would have liked this young woman. How she always said, that kindness was the only thing that really mattered in this world. When they reached cruising altitude, Michael stirred but didn't wake. Natasha carefully transferred him back to Robert's arms, showing him how to position his son, how to maintain that gentle pressure on his chest. "Remember to breathe," she said. "Long, slow breaths. He'll feel your heartbeat and your breathing, and it will calm him." Robert did as she instructed. He felt his own racing heart begin to slow. And Michael, as if by magic, settled more deeply into sleep. "I don't know how to thank you," Robert said. Natasha smiled. "You just did." She should go back to her seat now. The flight attendant was already moving up the aisle, probably to remind her. But Robert reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "Please," he said, "call me when we land. I'd like to repay your kindness somehow." Natasha took the card more out of politeness than any real intention of calling. She made her way back to row 6 and settled into her seat. The man beside her was already asleep and snoring softly. She closed her own eyes and felt, for the first time in weeks, like maybe things would work out after all. The rest of the flight passed quietly. Michael slept for 2 hours. When he woke, Robert remembered Natasha's instructions. He breathed slowly. He held his son with steady confidence instead of anxious fear. And Michael, sensing the change, stayed calm. 3 weeks later, Natasha was sitting in her cramped bedroom when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something made her pick up. "Natasha, this is Robert Chen, from the plane." She remembered him immediately. "Hello, how are you? How's Michael?" "He's wonderful," Robert said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I wanted to call and tell you that you changed something for us that day. The way you showed me to calm myself first, to be present with him instead of anxious. It's made all the difference." "I'm so glad," Natasha said. "I also wanted to tell you that I made some calls," Robert continued. "I know you were looking for a nursing position. There's a children's hospital in Boston that's opening a new pediatric unit. They need compassionate nurses who understand not just the medical side, but the emotional side of care. I told them about you. They'd like to interview you if you're interested." Natasha felt tears spring to her eyes. "You did that for me. It's the least I could do," Robert said. "You helped us when you didn't have to. When it would have been easier to just stay in your seat." That kind of kindness deserves to be rewarded. Natasha got the job. 2 months later, she was working in the new pediatric unit, caring for sick children and teaching anxious parents how to find calm in chaos. She loved the work in a way she'd never loved anything before. Robert and Michael visited her sometimes. They'd stop by with coffee and stories. A friendship grew between them, built on that foundation of unexpected kindness at 30,000 feet. Years later, when Michael was 5 years old and asked his father about his mother, Robert told him stories of Sarah's laughter and love. But he also told him about the young woman on the plane who taught them both something important. That in our darkest moments, when we feel most lost and alone, sometimes a stranger will reach out with gentle hands and show us the way forward. And that kindness, freely given and gracefully received, is what makes us human. It's what connects us to each other across all the barriers we build. It's what saves us when we think we can't be saved. Michael grew up knowing that story. And he carried it with him, looking always for ways to offer that same unexpected kindness to others. The gift keeps traveling forward, passed from person to person, heart to heart, one gentle touch at a time.